So here we're trying to find the domain of a function f of x equals the square root of x plus 3 divided by x squared minus 5x. Now there are two rules for right now of finding a domain. We want to look for any numbers that when substituted in for x would break the function. Okay? And so that means right now we cannot take the square root of negative numbers. Okay? Because the square root of any negative number would lead to a non-real answer. And the second is that we cannot divide by 0. So looking at our function here, we do have a square root, and so we need to make sure that the expression that's inside the radical cannot be 0. Okay? I'm sorry, cannot be negative. So our first restriction is that x plus 3 must be greater than or equal to 0, and then we solve for x. So x must be greater than or equal to negative 3. Now we also have a denominator here, and the other rule is that we cannot divide by 0, so that means that the denominator cannot be equal to 0. And now we solve this non-equality for x. And so I'm going to factor out an x. This gives me x minus 5 not equal to 0. That means x cannot be equal to 0. X minus 5 cannot be equal to 0. And then x cannot be equal to 5. That's just adding 5 to both sides. So these are the three restrictions that we have on this function. First, x has to be greater than or equal to negative 3, but it cannot be equal to 0, and it cannot be equal to negative 5. And so sometimes it just helps to graph this before we write our final answer. 0, 5, and negative 3. So our first restriction is that x must be greater than or equal to negative 3, so it's going in this direction. However, x cannot be equal to 0, so I'm going to put an open circle there. X can be anything between 0 and 5, but it cannot be equal to 5, okay? And then it can be anything greater than 5. So if I wanted to write this in interval notation, I would start at negative 3 all the way up to 0, but not equal to 0, union with anything greater than 0 and up to 5, or anything between 0 and 5, and then I'm allowed to have anything that is 5 or greater. And so this is my domain.